Welcome back, y'all, to some Algebra 3 funness. Today we're learning about completing the square in the quadratic formula. So first, let's see what a quadratic equation is. A quadratic equation comes in the form of ax squared plus bx plus c. Now usually equals some value. In this case, it's equals 0, where a, b, and c are actual values. Okay, so x squared and x are still just that. But let's look at an example of a quadratic equation. Now here's one, pretty simple one we all kind of know about. Let's look at, what would be a good one? This would be a good one right here. So let's look at x squared minus 6x plus 9. Plus 9 equals 0. Okay. Now, when we do quadratic equations, we're looking for what we'll be solving when we're completing the square or using the quadratic formula is the values of x itself. So most of our problems, what we do is like, all right, let's factor this. So we can break this down, this trinomial into two binomials. So what times what gives me x squared? X times x. What times what multiplies to be 9, but add up to be -6, -3, and -3. This is a perfect square right here, or perfect trinomial, because both of these are the same right here. So that equals 3, so we only need 1. X minus 3 equals 0. Add 3. We get x to equal 3. Okay, so that's the value of x in that case. Well, sometimes we don't get ones that nice and that easy. Sometimes you get something a little bit harder. Let's look at some other ones right here. All right, the one I had for an example right here. It's perfect one. So what about you get something in an equation like this: x squared plus 8x equals -15. You're like, okay, well, let's make it look like a quadratic equation. So we're gonna add 15 to both sides. When we do that, we get x squared plus 8x plus 15 equals 0. Now, this is how look. We're gonna get it back to this point right here, but we'll see why. All right, so nothing multiplies to be 15. Actually, yeah, two things multiply to be 15 and added to be 3. But let's look at the completing the square method. It'll be easier to just factor this out like we did the last one, but we're gonna use this easy one to show the completing square for one that's about to be a little bit harder than this. So what you do is, of course, you always move the constant away from here, -15, -15. So we kind of get back to this spot right here. So we got x squared plus 8x, and I'm gonna leave some space right here, equals -15. So the way completing the square works is we take this middle term, the 8, so that we can take that 8 over here inside, and we're going to half that. We're going to half that. When we half that, we get 4. And then what that is, that 4, that number right there, that 4, we're going to square it. When we square it, we get 16. That equals 16. So that 16, we're going to add to both sides. So we're going to add 16 right here, plus 16, and then plus 16 over here. When we do that, we now have a perfect square. So we got x squared plus 8x plus 16 equal 1. It's now when we factor this, what two things multiplied to be x squared? X and x. What two numbers multiplied to be a positive 16 added to be a 8? That's positive 4 and positive 4. So that means this is a perfect trinomial. So when we put them together, we get x plus 4 quantity squared, because there's two of them, equals 1. I'll put it 0 here to 1. Now this is where the rest of the last part that will happen. You're going to square root both sides. Now when you square root anything that has a square, they cancel each out. So you got x plus 4. Over here, when you square root the 1, you end up getting a positive and a negative 1. Now this is where you'll get the two answers. You're going to subtract the value of 4 minus 4. So we'll have two answers. X equals positive 1 minus 4, negative 3. Or negative 1 minus 4, negative 5. These are our two answers right here. But let's try one a little bit harder. Why? We're going to use the same method, but something a little bit harder. Ooh, clear. There we go. Let's try this equation. X squared equals 22 plus 10x. Okay, so just like before, we want the x squared plus ax squared plus bx to equal the c over here. Now, what we didn't have on this one, which I think you probably won't also have in your homework. Let me double check real quick. I think you're gonna have on your homework. Nope, you won't. Perfect, even better. All right, is if you ever have a variable that's greater than 1 right here, like a 2, 4, 6, 3, 4, 5, you have to divide everything by that number. But in this case, we don't. All right, so we're going to move this over here because we want the x's in the same side. So we're going to minus 10x minus 10x. Now, they can't subtract, so you just write them side by side. So we got x squared minus 10x. We're going to leave a little space equals 22. So this is where the completing the square part happens. We're going to take that middle term, that negative 10. We're going to half that and take half of that. We end up getting negative 5. And then that negative 5, we're going to square it. We get positive 25. And that's what we're going to add to both sides, plus 25. In doing so, we're left with the equation x squared minus 10x plus 25 equals 47. Now this is a perfect trinomial, meaning it's made up of the exact same binomial. So what times what gives me x squared? X and x. So you just write 1x, and then what times what gives me 25 by add up to be negative 10, negative 5. And since we have two of these, we're going to just write a square. Now, the step I skipped that some of us might confuse is that what happened is I split this up to be x minus 5 times x minus 5. But the whole purpose of complete a square is to get these two to be exactly the same. So they look like this. This equals 47. So then from here, we're going to just square root both sides. Let's square root this side. And when I square root this side, we got to include that square. Again, when you square root something that's square, they cancel each other out, leaving you just what's in the parentheses, x minus 5. On this side, though, 47 is a prime number. It doesn't have a square root, so we leave it as plus or minus radical 47. That's very much possible. Now, to solve for x, we got to get x by itself, so we're going to add 5 to both sides. Now, 5 cannot add to that, so our answer will be pretty simple. X equals positive 5 plus or minus radical 47. Unlike the last problem where you could add or subtract negative 4 to the 1 or the negative 1, this one you can't because of the radical. So we can just leave like that, and we're done. And that's completing the square. The other half, part 2 of this assignment, is the quadratic formula. So if we remember the quadratic formula, we use these parts of the quadratic equation, but sing along with me, all right? So the quadratic formula goes like this. The formula we use, x equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. So a, b's, and c's, they all come from the variables in front of our x squared, our x, or just our constant variable. So we're going to try out a couple of these right here. So let's do one that we kind of just did right now, so something a little familiar. We did this one earlier. So we had x squared minus 2x minus 15 equal 0. All right. Now, what we're going to do then is here's our a. What's in front of the x? It's understood 1. So this is our a. In front of the x, this is our b. And we include the sign with it. And this is our c. This is our b. We're going to plug these variables in here. So, like it says, x equals negative b. So the negative 2 plus or minus the square root of b squared, so negative 2 squared minus 4 times a, which is 1, times c, which is negative 15. This whole thing, not including the x, all over 2 times a, which is 1. So negative 2, negative 2 gives us just positive 2 plus or minus the square root. Let's see what we're going to square root. So when you square this, negative 2 squared gives us a 4 plus. Now, not plus. Hold on. Actually, we'll say like that for a second. All right. So we got negative 4 times 1 times negative 15. So if we take this negative times this negative, we'll get a positive. That means this answer will be positive. 4 times 1 is 4. And then 4 times 15 gives us 60. right there. All over 2 times 1, 2. Okay, so let's simplify that. So 4 plus 60 is 64, and we can square root that. So we end up getting 2 plus or minus the square root of 64, which is 8 all over 2. So here's where we get two answers. We get the positive one, 2 plus 8 gives us 2 plus 8 over 2 gives us 10 over 2, which gives us 5. And then 2 minus 8. 2 minus 8 over 2. So that gives us 2 minus 8 be negative 6 over 2 because it's negative 3. So our two answers are negative 3 and 5 for x. Now you think, oh, that was a lot more work than I needed. True, but this is an easier one. Let's look something a little bit more difficult. Something where you get a couple of radical answers. Actually, just look one from your homework. Let me open that up. All right, here's a perfect one. This is number 2 from your homework. Looks like this. 8x squared, okay, 8x squared minus 8x plus 10 minus 8x plus 10 equals 0. So 8 is A, negative 8 is B, and then positive 10 is C. So again, our equation, x equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Perfect. Let's just substitute these numbers. That's all you got to do. So we got x equals negative b, so it'll be negative 8 plus or minus the square root of b squared, so negative 8 squared minus 4 times a, which is 8, times c, which is 10, which is a big number, all over 2a. 2 times a, 2 times 8. 2 times 8 is right there. Let me get my handy dandy calculator for this. I'm going to need that. Where I leave that at? Here it is. All right. So let's simplify the first part. So negative 8 is positive 8. So x equals positive 8 plus or minus the square root. So negative 8 squared, negative 8 times negative 8 is positive 64. Okay, so here we got minus a 4 and 8 and a 10. They're all positive, so the answer would be minus. So be minus. So 4 times 8 times 10 gives us 320. 320 all over 2 times 8, which is 16. All right, so we take 64 minus 320. We're going to get a negative 265. We kind of dealt with this before. So we got x equals 8 plus or minus the square root of a negative 256 all over 16. Now remember, see this negative sign? We worked on the last assignment. We got to take that out. When you take that out, that becomes an I. So we got 8 plus or minus I radical 256 all over 16. Now, 256 does have a square root. Anyone want to take a guess at this? Anybody? 256 square rooted? Going once, going twice. Yes, you are right. It is, wrong way. Bam, bam. It is 16. So we square root that. We got 8 plus or minus 16i over 16. And now because of this I, you can't actually take 8 plus 16 or 8 minus 16, but we can reduce. What goes into 8, 16, 8 evenly? Yeah, 8. 8 goes into all this evenly. So 8 goes into that, 8 goes into that, 8 goes into that. We're left with 1 plus or minus 2i over 2. Let me double check that's the answer. Not messing you up. Yeah. Now, in your homework, it has them separated. If you leave them together like this, that's fine. But you should get this answer. So if we separate this, we get 1 plus 2i over 2, or 1 minus 2i over 2. All right. Hopefully this helps out. Catch you guys on a different day. Bye.